I was really pleased to see the Global Commission's report on HIV and the law, and it was really terrific to see that body of evidence come forward to arm people with the arguments they need to show that this is actually bad for public health and bad for individual health.
No, and that message needs to get out there. There's still so much ignorance, particularly within justice systems and enforcement systems, the police, border guards, immigration, all of part of the problem is that the truth and the wisdom that we think we know isn't getting to the people who are actually enforcing some of these. And two of the areas of human rights, there's a lot of issues in human rights that are important, but the two that we feel that we really need to push is the criminalization issue. Criminalization of non-disclosure, criminalization of exposure, criminalization of transmission, and what that means. And those laws are almost invariably misguided, misapplied, and unjust. The other part of human rights that we are particularly pushing is travel restrictions, because they're really a proxy. When you have a country that has travel restrictions, not allowing a person who's HIV infected or not allowing a person who doesn't want to have an HIV test into a country, it really exposes that there are probably a lot of other human rights violations going on. So we're using those as proxies, and we have a list. We're now down to 46 countries where they still have some form of restriction. We also track criminalization, and we track that case by case. We work closely with the human rights agencies, and I think the thing about criminalization is we see that more often in the high-income developed countries than we do in some of the developing middle-income, low-income countries.
How important is it for America to keep up its contributions to areas like the Global Fund and PEPFAR, and to lead in this fight that we've led in for so long?
It's absolutely critical. You know, we talk about the money, and we should acknowledge that 48% of the international response comes from the United States. And that's the money that goes through PEPFAR programs, other programs, the money that goes to the Global Fund. But the U.S. has been critical in so many other areas. The activism that has forced governments, faith leaders, a whole private sector, the pharmaceutical companies to recognize the roles that they need to play, the leadership that they need to play.
So is part of the solution the same level of activism on the community's behalf in other nations pressuring their own governments to bring more resources to the table?
One of the things that the activist community here has done, partly they came up because when we looked at our traditional leaders, when we looked at our presidents and our prime ministers and our religious leaders, particularly in the 80s and 90s, they failed us. And so the leadership had to come from a different place. It had to come from activism. It had to come from other faith leaders. It had to come from sometimes private sector communities, people living with HIV, people affected by HIV, people who knew what the real story was and who knew the real facts. Over time, we've seen the more traditional leaders taking on the role they should have been playing 30 years ago. But it is an ongoing issue, and I think one of the things that the activist community here needs to even do more of is capacitate the activist communities in the South, because there are different issues and very different environments.
How optimistic are you that we can marry the scientific advances with societal solutions to actually begin to end AIDS?
You know, I've been to a lot of the International AIDS conferences, not all of them, but most of them, and each conference seems to have not only its own technical aspects and themes, but a mood. And the mood at this conference is definitely more optimistic than what we've seen in some of the previous, and that's justified. But when you look at the 10 targets that were set last year, just for 2015, halving sexual transmission, we have a long ways to go for that. Stopping TB infections and TB deaths, we still have a long ways to go there. Ending infections in children That's more than just newborns. That's really in the first several years of life. We could do that. We could do that. So we're seeing a mix of achievable targets and those where we probably won't achieve it unless we change the trajectory. I mean, we're seeing linear declines, and we need exponential declines. We need to go from a graph that looks like that to a graph that looks like that.